Hey, everybody. I brought on Dana Busch. You guys remember her from a while ago? I brought her on the Celebrity Series because she's this incredible jewelry designer, and she's been on Vogue magazine, Cosmopolitan. I think you've been on like everything.
I've been in a few. Very kind of you to mention that. And we did do a talk too around, so this kind of the continuation of the, really this crazy emotional state and an uncertain time and fragility and stress that we're all
Yeah.
experiencing, which is really leading to a lot of breakdown in our communities, including
Yes.
with people in our world, in our life, in our communities who, this breakdown shouldn't be happening. But it is. And how do we start to kind of figure this out
Yeah.
and identify, especially identify when we're the ones creating this? How do we break from this? So
Yeah.
I know I kind of,
And
yeah, go ahead.
Dana is a psychologist, you guys, too. So she's had lots of years experience with this. And in addition to the jewelry designing, and
Exactly.
she's a good friend of mine. So we're going to have a little chat today about this division that's happening, that we believe is by design, but we also believe that there are ways around it that we can figure out and navigate our way through this without without as much division.
Yes,
We're going to try to pull
exactly.
everybody together as best we can. And I know that this has been really difficult to try to even figure out how to talk to people right now, because the things we're talking about are so darn sensitive, and
Mhm.
there seems to be more and more and more and more of a divide.
Yes.
So, and we believe that that was by design, that this has all been part of the plan for many years for this to happen. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that?
I,
Or what was, I mean, we know that this is a
yep.
misinformation warfare.
Yes. And I think when kind of Amy talks about this divide, and something that I really feel too, that it doesn't get, I think, talked about enough is, and a lot of our conversation today is going to really be specifically about the division within our country, and unfortunately the increased division between our two political parties and how that's spread into every facet of society, even things that shouldn't be political, like the virus shouldn't be political, like election fraud shouldn't be political. These are all things that we should uniformly come together, but we've had this division. And I'm first to say that I believe that there's corruption on both sides. I'm not the person that says one party is good and the other party is bad, but that's what their agenda is. Their agenda, in my opinion, is we have a handful of powerful people on both sides who really love to keep us divided, because when they keep us divided, they continue to have the power, and they continue to, behind the scenes, I personally feel, work together, and then work together with powerful people in public and private life and in companies and around the world to kind of institute whatever they want to institute. And I think that one of the things that they've been able to successfully magnify in this last year is a division that has such an emotional charge. And part of that is, we have been layered and layered with so many aspects of stress and uncertainty that, people are in overload, and everything has become incredibly emotional, and the divide is never greater. And I hope, if anything, that Amy and I can help you come away with today. And this really requires you to kind of come down a bit out of the emotional space and into your own power and ownership, and really be especially open and willing to listen to someone who has a different perspective, look at information that is not where you would normally look, and be willing to use an objective, as much of an objective lens, because at the end of the day, a healthy functioning society operates in the middle. And right now, there's nothing that is about being in the middle. It's like it's either this or it's this, and there's no room for any conversation. And if we continue on this path, we're going to be in real trouble, and none of us are going to be happy with the outcome. And at the end of the day, when we get down to the basic essentials of what as human beings matters to us, we share those same values. We want to feel safe. We want to be loved. We want to have the opportunity to live a fulfilling life. And no one wants war. No one wants people to feel badly. So we need to remember what these core values are that we share with people, and also use that lens when we're having a conversation, and in particular with someone who has a different perspective. And Amy and I can talk about this a little bit later. We talked about it in a conversation before, where we don't realize how powerful our language is. And even by using a few simple changes with words you're using or how you approach something, I think you're going to find that you're going to have much greater success in creating the mutual space with other people to come together and share information, and hopefully be able to do it in a respectful way that opens your mind. So
Can you give some
that's what I'm going to say.
Can you give some examples of that? We would love to learn some language to use.
Yeah. So if I'm having a conversation, I want to try, especially with an individual who I already know, we have some differences of opinions, and then on top of it, everything is emotional. No one likes to feel attacked, and no one wants to feel separated. So if I entertain a conversation and I'm using the word you all the time, you is a word that creates division. It's like you're there and I'm here. And when I use the word you, I'm imposing my views upon you. I'm making assumptions about you that may be, incorrect. And what I need to do instead is offer up my perspective that doesn't infringe upon you and opens a conversation. So I focus on really making sure that as much as possible, and it takes practice, that I'm only using I statements. When I use an I statement, I'm opening myself up to share with you my perspectives, my thoughts, and I'm not making any assumptions about what you're thinking or who you are. I'm simply entertaining the space to be vulnerable and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. This is my perception. I have explored information from over here, and this is why I am thinking the way I'm thinking. And, I would love to have the opportunity for you to be able to share what your perspective is, so that I can have an understanding of something that I'm not aware of. Because at the end of the day, I want us to come together and to be able to help empower one another through different information. And we might not agree on everything. I think that's the other thing too, is the more we can depersonalize someone's opinion who's different than ours, we also make it less emotional. Another simple one is I try and avoid using the word but. Every time the word but, when you want to use the word but, the reality is and is the more appropriate word, because I can go on, but the second I use the word but, it negates everything that I just said. It invalidates everything I just said. True. When the truth is both exist. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create a larger space and a larger perspective where we allow the opportunity for many things to share the same space. So those two things alone, you will find have a huge impact on people's receptivity, on their openness to a conversation, on de-escalating kind of emotional charge. And it's something that's very unconscious, but I think you'll start to notice the difference when you start to entertain conversations from that perspective. So those are two key ones that I always share with people. So
yeah, that's awesome. I think a lot of what's going on too is that people are figuring out who they're listening to, they're forming that opinion stronger and stronger. And
Yes.
a lot of it is based on rumor, just like Celeste had said in the beginning of this, it's all rumor.
Yes.
So do you really know that that person's that way?
Yeah.
Do you truly know that that's what's going on? Or
Hmm.
could any of it be a lie or an illusion, or
Yeah.
even something else? Could it be completely manipulated? It's possible it could be
Yeah.
completely made up and fabricated.
Sure.
It's possible. So
Yeah.
entertain that anything could be true. And just like at school with the Scarlet Letter, or what was that? There was a really cute movie. I think it was actually called the Scarlet Letter
Uh-huh.
movie, but it's a more modern day one that's really cute. But do you just believe what everybody, your sources of information, do you just believe those blindly and say,
Mhm.
oh yeah, I know that to be true? Well, do you really, have you talked to the
Sure.
person?
Sure. And
Have
I think
you really seen that stuff going on? Just question
exactly.
things more rather than jumping. And why not go to the source, or why not look underneath it a little bit? Look at, like she was saying, like look at different information.
Mhm.
Start, if you want to kind of stir up some things, you want to just kind of look a little deeper.
Mhm.
You'll go to some place like BitChute.
Yeah.
BitChute is a very open forum where anyone can say anything they want. With all the censoring and editing going on right now, you really want to be able to pick and choose what it is that you want to believe. You want to be able to form your opinion from having taken a good look at all of it. You don't want to
Exactly.
just listen to mom, or just listen to dad, or just listen to your neighbor for all what they think, and just kind of like, yeah, what they said. You don't want to just go blindly by what somebody is saying. This is a really big time in our history. This is probably the biggest time that's ever actually been even on our planet.
Mhm.
So this is a battle of good and evil, and this is between
Yes.
you and God, and your very spirit is at stake. Your soul is at stake. So do not just willy-nilly believe anything. Take a look at the opposite side, see what they're saying, see what they're viewing.
Yep.
Look at this side, see what they're saying, and see what they're viewing, and discern
I
for yourself.
exactly. And I think kind of tied to your point there too, Amy, is, part of, I think part of us all being responsible too is, a lot of times now we have to dig to other layers. So it's, there are people who will provide, resources to what they're saying. So go and look at those resources. Are they coming from a credible place? Do we, can you research those further? And I hate to say it, but in this day and age, it's like, who owns what? So there's a lot of deeper layers of power. I mean, someone,
Great point. That's serious.
yeah.
Well,
So,
tell people more about that, because that's huge. People don't realize that that's going on right now. That a lot of what you're hearing is because it's been paid for. The information is coming from some people back here that are paying all this money to have this message go out too.
exactly.
Take
So,
where
so
whose pockets are getting lined by telling you.
exactly. Exactly. So a good example that happened several months ago, and this is also someone, especially if I am talking to someone who, I know has some different perspectives. I also try and share what I consider less emotionally charged, and also divided between political lines information. So, last spring, I continue to have concerns about Bill Gates. So, and there's a lot of things that I think uniformly as individuals, people will say that, any conflict of interest are never good in any situation. I would say most people agree with that. They recognize when a conflict of interest is at play,
Yeah.
it creates less integrity in a situation. I think we also recognize, regardless of what your thought processes are or who you voted for, that people with a lot of money have a lot of power and influence, and that it's been used by many people of different political affiliations to get and do what they want, and that between conflict of interest and money and power, that's a deadly trio there. And so, someone like a Bill Gates there's a lot of factual information about him because he's big in the public. And it's like, so, you look at his, his connections with basically, for all intents and purposes, controlling the vaccination industry and being the second highest funder of the World Health Organization and having had Anthony Fauci on every project of his. And you look at, you continue to look at his ability through his.
We might want to talk in code a little so this
doesn't. Oh, sorry. That's true. Sorry. So,
Mr. F and
yes,
Mr. Yates, maybe.
There we go. There we go. So,
yeah, true though. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so I had a friend where I shared with her that I thought the G-Man had some problems. And she was very receptive. And so she found an article in a publication that was very glowing about who he was, and he's getting the bad rap, and and really he's getting the short end of the stick. And this is someone who's a humanitarian and this and that. And again, how most of the media presents it is in a very altruistic, giving, generous, philanthropic way. And so she sent me this article, and I proceeded to say, well, I wonder who owns that publication. So I dug and I got onto Wikipedia, and there was an entire paragraph written about Mr. G and how the owner of this publication had agreed to give up half of all of his wealth, either before he passed away or on his passing, to Mr. G's foundation and all this. And I just copy and paste that, and I sent it to my friend, and I said, you are never going to see a negative story or a controversial story about Mr. G in this publication because of this relationship. Yes. And so, we can be quick to read a story that's written away, but then you need to dig deeper and unfortunately look for the power and financial dynamics and who's connected, and then use that to discern the article, use that to look at things. I mean, you hear all the time too that you may have a flashy headline of a story, but then the article is the complete opposite, but people read the headline and they're like, oh, well, I see that. And then they don't realize that the article is not reflective of that, or has a different approach. And so it's up to us to dig and look at those connections. And there are also some people out there that I know that Amy has watched some of these too. There's some people that do a really great job of beautiful flowcharts of who's connected to who, and what those dynamics are, because those matter. And I think we all agree upon that. Mm-hmm. And so that's I guess an example of that. And then something I don't want to forget too, because I think it touches upon what Amy was saying too, and this goes back to languaging, is oftentimes when people make statements and they don't realize why they're setting someone off, is they're making statements using absolute language. So, all people are this, or this group is this. And in actuality, I hate to say it, what you're doing is you're being racist also, because you are making an assumption about a general group, and you are, you're painting them in one way. And you're also with the language saying that there's no room for any other perspective than this. So, and that sets up defensiveness, and it sets to diminish or completely stop a conversation. And you need to recognize that, that's not the reality. I mean, about the only thing that's absolute is a math problem. And at some point they're going to find a way for 1 + 2 to not be 3 anymore. But we need to be careful when we say that, because, if you were in the other position, and I'm sure we've all been in a situation where someone's used languaging like that towards us too, and we find it offensive. And maybe they don't realize they've just now lumped me in this category of terrible, awful people. And so it's up to us to be responsible and mindful of our languaging, of our conversations, of what we share, that we've done as much research as we can, and we make sure that we're not crossing the boundary with someone else. And that alone is going to help start to, hopefully bring us together in a civil conversation, and to really, again, continue to recognize that really the things that truly matter, we're all unified on. And we need to get back to that. So, yeah.
Well, and a quote comes to mind that it's not about seeing through others. It's about seeing others through. If you can, if you can have an open mind and an open heart, you could actually help that person to see your truth.
Yes.
You could help them you could say, I would love to know how you came to that conclusion. Can you please tell me more information about what you know? I would love to learn more about that, because from what I've learned and from what I've seen, this is what I've been taught or told, or this is what I've been thinking. Do you have some other sources I could check out? Or do you have, how do you come to this? And then the other person can respond back to that and saying, I'm so glad you asked. Yes, there's this and this and this research. I used to think that too. And this is where I came to the conclusion that I came up with. You guys can have a productive conversation, and you're actually genuinely caring about the other person rather than attacking them or assuming things and jumping on them, and and definitely putting a greater divide between you guys.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting too, because it also starts to be a way, hopefully, that people start to understand when they're, and again, this is a bigger challenge of the wake up, is when we are in our emotional brains, which, let's face it, we live there a lot of the time anyways, but with everything that's going on right now, most people are in their emotional brain. And when they're in their emotional brain, they don't tend to really be in a logical place. And it's and we've all experienced this. And again, what magnifies the problem is a lot of the simple language things I mentioned and how you entertain a conversation. But we've all experienced when individuals have shared something and you ask them to explain it, and they can't, and they get angry. And part of that is because it's coming from an emotional place, and they don't have the logic to support it, or their only reason for having that feeling or thought is because they're so emotionally upset about the alternative that it's more about that than the other. So I think what Amy just talked about in terms of, and I kind of call some of that a backdoor conversation, where you open the space to query people. And then if they find themselves where they can't answer that, I mean, I've had, people where I've said, you know what, and then they don't want to talk. And I've had some friends where I said, you know what, I want to hear your opinion, because one of the things that's destroying our society is they don't want us to have a conversation. And we haven't fostered within our society honest conversations and boundaries and open communication. We've been all about, let's all just feel good and let's all just pretend everything's nice and we'll avoid everything that we don't want to deal with. And now we're in the crisis we're in. And if we don't start having honest conversations and being vulnerable enough and at the same time respectful enough with other people, we're going to be in a real place of hurt. And then the crazies and the corruption on both sides and all their supporters and funders are the ones that win out. And I said to people, you know what? I want to hear what your opinion is, and I want to understand it. And yet I need you to come to the table with some credible, factual, logical information. I want to understand why you're supporting, this group or this person or this policy, because that matters to me. It matters to me what you think of, because I value you as a person. And yet, if all that can happen is you to be emotional about it and have no facts, there's nothing I can do with it. And I've also then shared with that, and I'm thinking of this one conversation in particular, and I said, something you need to realize is that the decisions that you are making based off of this are very serious and have serious implications. And so it's really important that your decisions in these ways are really based in some grounded facts and realities. Because if they're based in emotion and you make this reactionary choice, you may actually be supporting something that's very detrimental to you. So, it's challenging times, and I think we all need to recognize that, and we all need to start behaving like adults. So
yeah, I agree completely.
mm-hmm.
And it's like we when we're in that emotional state, when we're mixed up, we don't know what to do, there's like this defense that comes up, and we give our power away, and we think that the authorities, whatever those may be, whether they're usually in the government, but any type of authority, you just give your power away to whatever they're saying or they're doing, and assume that they have no malicious intent.
Mm-hmm.
But back in the Holocaust, do you think that they just said, hey, everybody, guess what? We're gonna bring you in these buildings and set you on fire. They had to be tricked to do that. They had to be convinced, pretty darn convinced, to go ahead and go along with it. So how do you think that they were tricked back then? And could it be the same type of psychological warfare we're experiencing right now? Could it be tricked?
I think absolutely. And one of the things that I think people who do see these concerns and have been exploring it is that when things are done slowly and subtly, and also, again, back to the psychological packaging of it, it sounds good, it looks good, it's billed as innocent, it's billed as, this is, good for society or whatever. You get a ton of people to buy in.
Yeah, it's for everyone's safety.
Yep.
All of that, yeah.
And it's it's subtle increments. I don't have children, but I start hearing about my friends who do, and some of these horrific things that kids are being taught in schools right now, and the craziness that, even parents were not aware of. And, but I also think too, and this is one of the things that I see going on in our country, and I'm sure this was the same in Nazi Germany. But how many people, if it's not personally relevant to you right now, like if you aren't being personally impacted on a certain level, it's very easy to say everything's going to be fine, or, oh, it isn't that bad. How many people also say, oh, they think, oh, communism could never come here. We've always been this free place, and we've been isolated, and we've got all this stuff. And that's exactly when it happens. When people think it can't happen here, and all of this makes sense because of how it's been packaged, and it's really not impacting me yet. And, and the government has their reasoning and their solutions for why they're doing what they're doing. And, we always need to be vigilant. We always need to be aware, and we always need to know that just because it's not happening now, don't think you aren't next. I have friends who, don't seem to be fazed, and quite frankly, don't know about the level of censoring that's going on of people. And, and some of them, I think, are fine with it because of, the types of people and groups that are being censored. But at the end of the day, I said, then don't think that you're not next. Just because you're not the one being censored now. It's just like the severe lockdowns with the virus. It's like, well, what's the next thing they're going to impose? And what's the next thing you're going to go along with that goes against your constitutional rights? And it doesn't matter that the science isn't there. And now they've psychologically gotten people, so hysterical that, they are not able to see all of the other destruction. How many people have been thrown into poverty? How many people have been thrown into homelessness? How many people have killed themselves, to overdose, to suicide, to domestic violence? Look at the destruction of the educational systems. Look at the doubling of suicide rates in children. Look at all of the medical conditions that aren't getting treated. And look at how now you can go out on the street and some stranger starts screaming at you. And it's just, how many people think all of this is normal, and don't equate all this other destruction, and then aren't demanding from our society to say, you know what? So why are we not caring about all these other deaths? Why are we not? And a lot of it too is it's not getting publicized, but it just goes back to this manipulation. And when people are in an emotional state, I mean, sometimes you can show them very factual information and it still is just not going to go in. It's not going to go in. So,
well, I think, okay, so whatever political party, if there is election fraud going on or any kind of fraud at all, I personally, I don't care which party it is. Yes. If I'm in that party that might be doing that, I would demand that there be a recount or something. Exactly. I would look into the evidence or anything that I could, and I would say, look, if this isn't fair, let's do this again. I'm not just going to assume or scoff at anything like that.
Yeah. And I think to that point too, Amy, my question is, and again, this is a question to supposedly the civil servants, because that's what government is. It's civil servants that are elected in our constitutional republic, which I think people also need to understand. We're not a democracy, we're a constitutional republic, and school yourself on what the difference is. But that our foundation of what makes our country so free and unique are the elections. And everyone should be concerned, as you were just saying, about the integrity. And for those that are so, determined to say that there was no fraud, then you should be actually very confident in a review of the election. Because if you feel there's no fraud, then you get to, kind of rub it in everyone's face and say, see what I told you? There's no fraud. We let you look at it and you didn't find anything. So again, you have to ask the question, why are there people so invested in stripping away one of the most important things we could do, which is to make sure that our elections have integrity? Why are there people that are so against that? If this is the foundation of our constitutional republic, those are the things that you should be asking. And yes, this shouldn't be divided on party lines. The virus shouldn't be divided on party lines. A lot of things, and that's another question you have to ask yourself: is why is this happening? And then you have to look at the corruption and the people who want it to be happening, and also be willing to fully own that there are some despicable people that are part of your political party, part of your friendship group, or whatever, that maybe you need to have a different assessment on. And, so it's, and kind of tied into that. And now we're getting into the racial card. My feeling, and again, as a psychologist and, coming from more of an altruistic ideal place, and also being a contextual behaviorist. So when I say contextual behaviorist, my orientation as a psychologist is that certainly everything, every second of my life from past to present point creates who I am and sets me up to move forward in the world in both, healthy and unhealthy ways, and aware and unaware ways. But at the end of the day, I'm completely and 100% responsible for the choices I make, for the actions I take, for the decisions I make, for the ways I'm thinking and viewing the world. And I have the greatest control over what happens in my world. And with every decision I make, there are consequences and benefits. And I don't get to only, accept the good things. I need to take ownership of the things I don't like. And if I'm not liking things, then it's my responsibility to change how I work and relate in the world. So for everyone who wants to, which we've been very quick to do that lately these days, is say it's so-and-so's fault, it's this group's fault, it's that person's fault. What you're doing is you're willfully allowing yourself to disempower yourself and disempower others and say, I really don't want responsibility. And when we create groups of people, that's what we're doing. So for example, me as a woman, I actually need to be more resilient in a category that's been considered demonized or, disenfranchised. And yeah, I'm going to have times where someone is going to be a chauvinistic pig towards me. It's my choice to choose how I react and respond. And the way we end what we're labeling as racism against, groups of individuals is to empower them, not to make them more helpless and say, because of a characteristic that you have that has nothing to do with your potential as an individual, this is the lens that you need to be looking through the world at. And this is the reason why your life isn't good or why problems are happening. And let's face it, you can't govern or legislate ignorance and racism out of people. The way you get rid of that, in my opinion, is we all say, we're all human beings. We all have different limitations and strengths, some people more than others. But what we need to do is we need to raise a resilient community. And we need to stand together as decent people and as, despicable people. And so, and that's how we should be looking at it. So even for me as a woman, if I see a woman behaving abhorrently, I'm not going to be like, well, she's a woman, I'm supporting everything she does. No, it's my job to be like, who are you?
That is so true.
But the second we put people into categories too, what also happens is we automatically create division. Like I was talking about languaging earlier. I mean, even if it's people that get along, the second you start having a conversation about characteristic differences, you are creating a divide. And what you are usually doing too is most of the conversation goes to the past and the history and not to moving forward because the focus is on this division. And when we continue to choose to reinforce this division, it allows people to manipulate it because those are the people that want to stay in power. So they want to manipulate this and, and then things get packaged a certain way. And look at what's going on now. Look at all of the progress we've made as a community to now be where we're at with groups and individuals in a way that doesn't make sense. And then on top of it, we go to these absolutes. And so, for example, me as a woman, there's a lot about the women's movement that I don't support. I am like, you know what? Don't box me into that. I feel really fortunate to be a woman in this country as opposed to a lot of other countries. And, and if I'm feeling disenfranchised as a woman, it's up to me to stop that in my world. And it's up to me, when I worked with drug and alcohol patients, when they came in, I didn't look at them and say, oh, you're an alcoholic, just go drink. That's all you can do. And we'll get you some, I had to have those conversations and say, you know what? You may have to give up friends. Yeah. You may have to really recognize why it is you're drinking. There's lots of things about your life that are going to be challenging that you're going to need to find a solution around and empower yourself. And that's what we need to be doing with every individual, especially around areas where people want to use it as a manipulation. And also for me to assume and make an assessment on an entire group of people, because guess what? There are plenty of gay people and Black people and women and old people that are really offended by a lot of these movements that we say everyone should support. It's like, I don't know what anyone else's world is. And that goes back to me being a contextualist, is we want to like impose these broad thought processes and these broad assumptions on groups of people, on facets of society, on programs that we do. And it's inaccurate, and sometimes it's offensive, and oftentimes it's destructive, because, for each person, situations are different. And I understand that we need, when we're looking at big issues, we have to have some kind of rubric. And yet at the end of the day, we need to continue to have this conversation around careless language and careless assumptions. So, and recognize that when we say things, we need to be mindful that we're not now being the racist person that we're railing against. Like, you all of a sudden like make a comment, you think this, this person over here is XYZ because you've got this image in your head of what that person is or what they look like, and and you don't know anything about them. You haven't bothered to like find that out, and that creates division, it creates fear, and it reinforces all the things that are destroying our society. So yeah. All right, I'll let you get a word edgewise, Amy. When I get on my soapbox, I'm like,
no, you're doing incredible. I mean, this is incredible information. This needs to get to everyone. This needs to get to everyone. Share this with your friends and family, you guys. Share this on your channel. There's just so much projection going on. That's why it's so important that we focus on our healing. It's like I'm just doing Byron Katie as often as I can. I'm doing Qigong to fill myself with God's source energy and knowledge, intuitive knowledge, and an understanding. And I'm looking for that. When I find the resistance from someone, I'm looking for what is the commonality that we share. What can I come from that they will agree with me with, that we could get on the same page about. And the more healing that we do, the less we're going to be falling for things. And I also, when something has happened, when I see something happening, the first thing I look at is, what are they trying to get me to do?
Yeah.
I mean, this is with people or with demons. It's the same thing. It works the same way.
Yeah.
What is it or they trying to get me to do? And if I do it, how does it benefit them for me to do that? Yeah. And or how could it be possibly a detriment to me if I do? So I try to look at all of it really objectively before I make a decision and before I go toward it or go to do it. Because just like we get tricked with the good cop, bad cop thing. I mean, I haven't bought really into I haven't gone into anything that's any kind of, I've gone here and I've listened to this. I've gone here, I've listened to that. I'm totally open to listen. I'm open to listening to all angles and all of it. And I go forward into what feels within integrity for me. And I listen to my intuition and my instincts and my discernment every step of the way. And I think that that's important, that we be present in the moment, so that we can essentially be holding God's hand through this process, God, group of deities, however you want to define that. But you've got to be listening to your spiritual source or your inner knowledge to take one step at a time in your own integrity, and not based on all these potential falsities and illusions. One of the things that kind of stood out to me, or kind of surprised me too, when you talk to actual doctors, there's been a proven cure for this for a long time, hydroxychloroquine, but it was given a bad name by those who would rather have us buy more expensive things that would line their pockets.
And what's interesting about that too,
and it's cheap, cheap. Cheap is expensive. This one's been proven for many, 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 many years to be incredibly effective. If you really look into it in the right sources. You can't go to Google, because Google does its censoring. You have to go to someplace like DuckDuckGo, or use the Brave browser. You guys have to start looking, not just in the normal places that you look, because you find the studies and you see the proof, and you hear the doctors who've been doing it for a really long time, where none of their patients are even getting this thing anymore. And they're, they've got almost 100%, or if not 100% effectiveness. So why would we be going towards something that's not even been tested or anything, and even has been shown to be tremendously detrimental to us, to our health?
There's actually, what Amy's talking about is there's And it's a combination of, and initially it was hydroxychloroquine, but it's that and ivermectin, which is another very inexpensive FDA drug that's been used off-label for a bunch of things, and also usually combined with vitamin D, zinc, and C. But it's called the eye mask protocol, and you can read about it. And when Amy first mentioned this subject, what it also made me think about, and this goes back to, you know, we all have our own expertise in certain areas where we can really explain with a certain level of certainty and knowledge about areas. And then there are things that we just don't know anything about, and we just kind of have to trust and assume sources that we're reading. So the interesting thing about the hydroxychloroquine is the very first study that really was, and I'll use the word exploited on the news, was a study that was done at a veterans hospital. And so in addition to being a clinical psychologist, I also have my master's in public health. My career was spent in academic medicine, working on lifestyle and wellness, designing clinical research, doing, obviously therapy and teaching and training residents. So in particular, especially with my public health degree, I had entire classes that were really on discerning quality research versus crap research. And at the end of the day, unless you really are, in that field and you understand that, like, something can sound great. So this study that was used to really kind of demonize hydroxychloroquine, it was the first one that came out in the news, and they're like, oh my God, and all these veterans died and blah, blah, blah. Well, so here's the reality with that study is, first of all, it was a retrospective study. So what a retrospective study is someone goes in and looks at historical data from a study and they analyze it. So that means that the study was not specifically designed to look at hydroxychloroquine, in relationship to the COVID virus or anything. They went back. So already it's not the right population. It's not studying from this point forward. It had no control arm either, which means, you're not testing it against a placebo. So already it's a crappy study that shouldn't be related to this at all. Secondly, it had something ridiculous like 12 or 13 patients in it. Well, that study doesn't have enough people in it to even qualify as a decent study, period. And then it was very elderly, very sick vets that had all kinds of conditions. So there were so many things about this that it shouldn't even been talked about. But, you have the news that wants to take it and wants to manipulate it. And then they present it to the general public, and the general public is like, oh my God, how terrible. So this is the type of manipulation that's going on. And there's a lot of manipulation when it comes to this virus. I mean, there are, plenty of credible scientists and doctors and, researchers around the country that will show you how things are manipulated. I mean, you can, again, another language thing. Why are we using words like spikes in cases? We're using hysterical language to scare people. Or, they might say, oh my God, the number of COVID deaths doubled in the community today. Well, maybe that number is 2 people. But, you hear the language you use, you can take something, and depending on the wording you're using, and in theory, they're being accurate, but they're doing it in a way to manipulate you. They're doing it in a way for you to have a certain thought about this and to create a certain outcome and a certain agenda. So it's dicey times out there, folks. Dicey.
Well, what would you say to those people who are saying no way with the news lie?
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, it's I would have to say, well, first of all, then there have been people that you can go and Google, and perhaps Amy may have a list of like links of some of these that can be shared related to some of this. But go look at who owns the majority of all of the news publications. Mm-hmm. So who are these people? And we have a large faction of our media here that's owned by China, for people who don't realize that. And so, you look at, universities in our country, including some of our leading science universities that now are, basically owned by the Chinese and, who have, and again, at the end of the day, you have someone who now has donated enough money that the school has been renamed after them. Don't think that they're not going to have an influence on what gets shared, what's allowed to be studied, what's allowed to be put out into the public. I mean, all this goes back. And this is where, like Amy said, there are plenty of other credible physicians and doctors who are showing you how certain things have been manipulated or how certain numbers have not been presented correctly. You have to take all that into account too. And there's a reason too that the news has chosen to use the word conspiracy. They could also say, you know what, this just happens to be the body of research we're looking at. There's plenty of other perspectives out there and plenty of other scientists who have other perspectives. They don't say that because that diminishes their power over you. And when you've now been told over and over again that the only thing that's credible is what we're sharing with you, and everything else is conspiracy, and of course the word conspiracy is a very emotionally laden negative word, then people just shut it down, and they're like, well, I'm not going to listen to that, and I'm not going to believe that. And what's interesting too is, and I'll use the virus again, for people who have just for whatever reason, and I'm not not trying to make an assessment here, but if you've been someone who's been listening to the news and has continued to support their findings, don't even you find it interesting that everything keeps changing? Like all of a sudden millions of people are going to die, but now only a few hundred, and now we have to admit that test wasn't right. But I mean, even the mainstream media is admitting to you all of the errors they've made, all the lies they've told, all the inaccurate data. So it's crazy. And then some of it's confusing. You want to go onto the CDC or on your own public health department's website, and they make it really difficult to understand their data. Intentionally. I mean, there's a group that I've been involved with here, and actually a PhD virologist got on the Colorado Department's public health website. And even for her to look at how they were showing the data was confusing. So if she's confused, what do you expect the rest of the public to be? So
I heard Dr. F actually, Dr. F made a public statement one time saying, we don't need those things on our faces. They don't do us any good.
Yeah.
It's like a little 2-minute clip where he was just like, you guys are being ridiculous. You guys don't be wearing those things.
Exactly.
And then shocked when I heard that. I was like,
particles, there's plenty
forward.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. So it's, and again, it part of that goes back to, the in a constant state of emotional fear right now. And so, and I think that's, been by design largely, and what's been happening. And now we're really at a calendar year now, let's face it, of when amping up. I mean, even a little bit before this, that there's not a single person in this world who has not been impacted by this, who has not been had an uncertainty factored into their life. Now, granted, there are some people where it's more of an annoyance and it hasn't personally impacted them, but the reality is no one has been immune from this. And then it's in every facet of people's life. It's in your health, it's in your finances, it's in your personal relationships, it's in, if you have kids. I mean, and so for a lot of people, now all of a sudden, they have layers and layers of stress that they don't know when it's going to end or how it's going to change. And when you do that, eventually we just completely wear people down to where they don't have the fortitude to think logically. They're just getting by and they're skating by. and they're emotionally upset, and we all just want this to end. And that's part of it too. How many people are willing to just give in because they just want this to end, and they think, okay, I'll just wear the mask. Okay, I'll just do the 5-star program with my business. I mean, it gets into the bargaining phase of, I can't take this any longer, and I'm just going to give in. And that's another dangerous slope that we are on in our society, is this, I'm willing to go against what I think is right, what I feel is factual, or against what I think, is going to lead to like the right outcome, because I'm that compromised. I'm that upset, or I'm that desperate because I've been put in that place. So, and it's not just in our country. I mean, we also have some added things like our election last year, but that's something you're not going to see on our news either. You start to look at the news around the world, and there are uprisings all around the world over the weaponization of the virus against the people in the communities. And that's when you also have to question too. It's not like we're just in our little bubble here going, this doesn't make sense. And there's some people in other countries that have been incredibly bold, like the number of people speaking out. And this is, the place to also educate yourself too. Because it's not just happening here. And then you have to, again, continue to ask and question, and continue to seek more information, so that you can best understand what's going on. And it's the willingness to look at a variety of sources, at least be open to it. So
thank you. This has been just such a beneficial talk.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it too.
Yeah. So you've given us some incredible ideas to go forward with. I think you've given, thank you for making these wonderful points. So it's really just coming down to discernment, open heart, open mind, and heal yourself. And just be aware of any type of potential possible manipulations. And try not to go with a group mentality, but think for yourself and do some deeper research. Look into some of these things. If you don't know about some of these things that we've been talking about, then it's because it's been censored out for you not to see and not to hear. But if you knew how many people were rising up all over the world, millions and all over the place. I mean, the channels that I'm watching and the people that I'm watching, I'm inspired like crazy.
Exactly.
It's incredible time of people rising up and fighting for their rights. And you don't see a lot of this stuff on other channels for the reasons that she said, that these companies, these news companies are owned by people who want to keep you guys in these trapped mentalities. Only what they are telling you,
Exactly. And something that I just thought of too, that I think is another valuable resource, and I can say this personally. So I have a number of friends here in the States, varying ages from, in their 20s to their late 70s, who have immigrated here from oppressed communist dictatorships, Uzbekistan, Venezuela, Colombia, Honduras, and every one of them is terrified with what they're seeing. And, and I think the thing about this is it's one thing for me to say, wake up to what you're seeing. But when someone who has personally lived this and knows what it looks like and knows the signs, you need to take heed and you need to listen. So go find someone. And I think you'd be hard pressed to find someone who came from a place like that, who isn't incredibly concerned about what they're seeing, who isn't going to say to you, this is how it happened in my country.
Exactly.
This isn't innocent. Don't think it can't happen here. And because they've lived it. You haven't lived it. I haven't lived it. But I can tell you someone who has, and when they say that to me, I really listen. because they have the personal experiential knowledge of it.
So true.
So, and those aren't the stories that the news is going to be presenting. They're not going to have the immigrant of the week who like came here because, they're not going to have that story.
Today we have Raul, and he's going to explain to us how they took over his country.
Exactly. Those aren't the stories that that you're going to hear. And again, kind of in addition to all the excellent points Amy just made as takeaways, but it's time for every individual to become empowered and recognize that it's up to you to take action. It's up to you to take ownership of the life you have and to be a responsible participant. And we haven't promoted that in society. We've promoted, this isn't my fault, it's not my responsibility, or if I just ignore it, it's not happening, or it's not impacting me now. We can't afford to be lazy right now. We can't afford to be ignorant right now. We can't afford to, sit and just think that someone else will take care of it. And when we do that, we have to recognize, well, then I'm part of the problem.
Yes.
And if
Absolutely.
the outcome happens that I don't like, I need to shut up because I didn't choose to take action in a way to get myself and our community to a place that benefits all of us, that we all deserve and we all desire. So it's time to really look within and to realize that there is a way for everyone to get involved, for everyone to do something, and that's your responsibility. And and hopefully we continue to be a country where we have those choices, and we can act accordingly. So, yeah.
Yay. Oh, thank you so much for coming on with me today, and thank you everyone who has stuck it through with us and listened to this whole thing. So
that's right, because Amy and I could talk for hours. Believe me, we could be like 10 hours later, and did you know this? And did you get that? And I forgot this. So,
yeah, and either of us would be happy to share any resources with you guys.
Yeah.
If you reach out to us personally, you know our information. Well, we'll put the information down below if just in case.
Exactly. That sounds great. And Amy, I always appreciate the opportunity to share with your audience, and I feel very fortunate to have you as a friend and as a colleague, and someone who's really trying to bring out the best in people and empower people. So I'm always thrilled to participate on your show.
Yay, thank you. All right, have a beautiful day, everyone.
All right, bye. Go do something, get active.
Yes, do something, do something.
All righty.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
If you like my videos, please like, subscribe, and share them with your friends. Also, feel free to join me at patreon.com/Amy Satori, where I post monthly energy readings, pick a decks, and other goodies for members only, including discounts for readings and being entered to win a free reading at the end of the year. Memberships start as low as $5.55 a month. Sometimes I even put my free collective love readings on Patreon first before uploading them here to YouTube. You can check the description of my videos for the most up-to-date information.